So Julian Stewart is also a very big individual in terms of theoretical anthropology. Julian Stewart does his ethnography work in the Great Basin region. Um, an amazing piece of anthropological theory as well. Kind of he coins the term of cultural ecology, which is really this idea of environmental determinism, that the environment around you, the food, the plants, the animals, those kinds of things determine how your culture behaves. Ultimately, how you interact with one another, your socio-political organizations, your symbology. Ultimately, he says that the environment dictates all of those things. Um, and I would urge people to steer clear of the idea of determinism. Again, I may have touched on this earlier in the semester about the feedback loop of environment, biology, and culture. That tends to be more of kind of a rounded way of looking at culture and the environment, because we do know that humans can manipulate the environment, which then causes environmental changes, which can also then change our own biology as well, right? So I actually recommend all three of these individuals. These three are powerhouses within American cultural anthropology, to be honest. So anybody interested in some of these other works, Stewart does an amazing ethnography in the Great Basin itself. Um, Socio-political organization, Degwani is the term that they use for headmen. These are men, but they're elected, and I use the word elected. It's more that it's kind of that self-government piece where people decide that this is going to be our leader. The position has a bunch of honor, so prestige is the word there. Um, and these individuals are in charge of keeping track of plants and animal resources, basically like what time it is to harvest, where we move, water, those kinds of things. Um, it's an honor, but they have a lot of responsibility as well. They get their name. It's kind of Degwani is also kind of refers to like the long talker. They give long speeches, and their other job is to mediate disputes. So if there's a dispute in the band, then this individual would have to deal with that. Um, Again, when we use the word headman, I'm even starting to get sensitive to the word headman. Um, the idea is that then we instantly start ranking our society in that way, and these individuals may have just served that role, right, which was an important role in society. Women in the Great Basin also had very high status and were esteemed. There was not this gender divide. There was not kind of this gender structure. A lot of women in these groups were shamans, and shamans were just as important as the headmen. So for me, again, there's some egalitarian uh, resolve here for sure. But again, the use of headmen kind of gives us this place and stature. We have to look at this kind of as a whole society and where different pieces fit in, and where the function of this fits in. Right, warfare was pretty much unimportant. We get the advent of the horse as part of a culture group, and then obviously war and some of those other things start to become more of an issue. It's not really documented prior to contact, so again, we can't really assume that it was there. The nuclear family unit was the most important, and again, this is typically quintessential kind of American 1940s family, which nuclear family, right, which is husband, wife, different gender roles kind of within that structure, and then kids. However, this like the 1940s as well in America may have also included grandparents, right? So you have the extended family. My family on my mom's side was this way. It was much in the kind of 40s, 50s. It was like uh, grandma lived close. Grandparents moved in with her to take care of kind of her after kind of later on in life. So turned into an extended family ideal. And this is kind of similar to the structure that the Great Basin people would have had. They were strictly exogamous marriage. Again, these were small band groups. So in order to mix the gene pool, you would not stick around in your own group. It was not endogamy. You would go and during these band level get-togethers during harvest and whatnot, you would then kind of reach out and court mates during that time period. Division of labor was flexible. Women hunted too, they trapped animals, and then men also processed nuts. Um, this again is one of those things where, was man the primary hunter in terms of the antelope hunt? Yes. Did women actually help to herd the antelope? Yes. So then we get into mixed gender roles. This would be one of those examples of, to be honest, if we start to dissect kind of the way things are, and leave out all of our colonial European kind of mentality around hierarchies and who's the boss and those kinds of things, we're looking at some egalitarian societies here, um, and ultimately self-government, right? Self-government, communal, uh, public property. They moved around. They were not sedentary like the Northwest Coast people. They did not have permanent huts or houses. So again, this kind of fits in that regard of egalitarianism. Um, so material culture and technology, again, fascinating group of people, right? If many of us, and I've done this in my past, when you go into the Mojave Desert, you look out and you go, what? There were Native American peoples that lived here? What did they eat? Right? And for us, food kind of just jumps out at us, or we sit in a drive-through line. Their food was everywhere. Again, when I went on this tour here with the at the Tomokani here in Sand Canyon and the Tehachapi's, they basically were like, yeah, no, they're where you see in the desert in that area, there were 175 plants that they could use for either food or medicine. And this was everything from, buckwheat to juniper berries to pinyon nuts to uh, stinging nettle. It's just vast with the food resources. Pinyon nuts were the most important to this Great Basin region. Again, this is what's kind of connecting, along with language, connecting the Kwaisu or the Nuwa people here in Tehachapi as well. So pinyon nuts brought bands together. This was a huge harvest, huge festivals around this, and also courting, because this is when you're kind of intermixing with other bands, so you're kind of able to create relationships. It would be like kind of in summertime if everybody went off to the same camp, and then they saw people that they knew and they had grown up with during these festivals, and now they have gotten older and start kind of dating around that. Brown cone and green cone, interesting, right? Brown cone is when they've already kind of the pine cone is already separated. You can see the pine nut inside. You can pull it out pretty easy. However, when that happened, a lot of the rodents and kind of desert animals would have been after the pinyon nuts as well. So a lot of these groups would pick the green cones. They would use this stick to pull the green cones off, and then they would put them on the fire to explode them out, and then get the pine nuts out of that. And then everybody basically around would smell of pine because they would have pine sap and resin all over them. Again, this term mechanical solidarity is important in terms of egalitarianism, and that is the idea that they can mix gender roles in terms of work, right? Different men are helping with the pinyon harvest, women are helping with the antelope herding, hunting. Okay, so again, this is a mixed idea. Occasionally, they practice agriculture. We talked about the two groups prior that probably did. There was the Owens Valley may have practiced agriculture and then stopped at some point. Again, depending on environment and really symbology too. We can look at the climate record and say, well, actually, the climate stayed the same. Why didn't they continue to farm? Then we can start to get into some taboos around it, right? Farming may have created a ranked system or a ranked society in the Owens Valley, and ultimately the people come together and say, look, it's farming. It's not how we behave. Farming is the reason why we're doing this. People are pretty aware and especially able to observe and analyze, right? So they could have created a taboo around farming. Actually, this is something that cognitive archaeologists go to when that material culture stuff doesn't pan out in the archaeological data. Bow and arrow technology. Again, we can look at bow and arrow as also a more individual weapon or hunting tool. So there is a little bit of divide there, right? I mean, if these groups did net hunting, which is a group effort hunt, then we're really looking at true egalitarianism, right? Like full blown, everybody's doing everything. There's no division of labor. Junipers. So juniper is very, very strong, but it's very flexible as well. So they would cut staves, right, for the bow in the juniper, and they would cut the stave out when it was like kind of flat, and then the juniper would grow back in that perfect stave. So you could just kind of keep harvesting from the same area of the juniper, and you can kind of shape the way that you wanted your bow really to end up. The yucca plant, super, super important in terms of cordage, rope. The threads of the yucca are used. The yucca fruit can be eaten. The seeds can be grounded into flour. The stalk can be eaten when it's young. And then the root can also be eaten. So yucca, major, major component to everyday life in this area as well. So we have the juniper, and the yucca is very big on the material culture. Traps and snares were used. Wickiups were the name of the housing structure that they would build. They're kind of the I guess almost like teepee, but more rounded, and they were out of obviously kind of more thatch, right? It was maybe a could have been wood frame, and then you kind of thatch around. And I think I have a picture of the wiki up in one of the past slides. Basketry was huge in this area. Pottery, not so much. Basketry was the name of the game, and they would waterproof it with insect resin, so that the baskets could be waterproof. Remember, then you heat up rocks in the fire, and then you fill the basket with water, and then you put your food in that water, and then you put the hot rocks in the water inside the basket. That becomes your soup or your stew, and then you pull the hot rocks out, and basically you have a big giant stew or soup. And many native groups, especially in this area, operated this, and they cooked like this. Shamans, there were specific shamans. There were two reasons for shamans. One was the spirit side, and one was a herb doctor. So there are definitely more shamanistic roles. And again, the herb doctor did heal illness with herbs. So obviously very high ranking in society, along with the spirit shaman too, right? Very high ranking in society as well. The religion, spirit helper, goes along with the spirit shaman. They might help with that. Spirit helpers are usually like animals or beings that you had in your dream. This went along with the vision quest or the puberty rite of passage as well. They had sky and sun spirits, as well as thunder and eagle spirits as well. The sky and sun were honored in that way. It's fascinating. Your book talks about the one father being part of the religious ideology, and it probably is more associated with Christianity and bringing that in and adding it in. They may have had more of a version of the Great Spirit, which a lot of natives have, and substituted that. It's just hard to pull out of that anthropological record. They did have sacred geography. Springs, lakes, and mountains would have been sacred. Many native groups, if not all, had sacred geography. This is a very important concept in anthropology as well. They did have the round dance. The round dance was a world renewal ceremony. People formed a circle, sang songs, chanted, and danced. And a lot of times these round dances would take place during the pinion harvest with other band levels. The bear dances, the Utes did the bear dances for goodwill of bears and hunting. Ghost dance, late 1800s, intended to revitalize native culture. This is important. Probably learned about it in history class a little bit. And then we get into the sun dance to fix issues on the reservation. And then currently we have the Native American Church, which revolves around prayer, kind of that Native American way, but also the use of peyote. It's one of the only churches in America that they allow the use of drugs for a ceremonial kind of reason. Shamans, and again, peyote's kind of that hallucinogenic cactus out in the desert. Shamans, supernatural power and could cure illness, right? Antelope shaman led the antelope hunt through capturing their souls. And then, interesting enough, the deceased traveled along the Milky Way and or through an underground passage to the land of the dead. Natives today, 45 reservations, numbers are growing, policy and laws, obviously those have changed. They're the same kind of in American history. One of your videos really focuses on that, so tune into that. Casinos in the area. Land right issues with the Kwayasu is really focused on that video that I was talking about. Make sure that you guys look at the Chumhoavi and the Owens Valley Paiute. Really, these are the two groups that you need to